Okay, this is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. I'm Evan Jansen. The show is live. It's broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. We are also streaming live on YouTube right now, but the whole show is always available on demand on our YouTube channel. Now today, it's our last day at work for 2014 here at Newsroom. We'll take a look at traffic scenarios first around the country as volumes are peaking on all major routes. We also get an update on Ebola and malaria. We look at the Miss Heritage World Contest, and we wrap up the year's weird and wonderful weather with Paul Minari, whereafter we'll take a look at sport. But first, let's get today's news from Katrine Milan.
Well, hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Katrine Milan, and let's just take a look at those top stories this morning. 7 suspects are expected to appear in the Blue Downs Magistrates Court outside Cape Town today in connection with the killing of 6 men at Kraaifontein. The bodies of the men, who were aged between 25 and 40, were found on a dump site at Joostenberg Vlakte last week. They all appear to have been stabbed and stoned to death. Police established a special task team shortly after the gruesome discovery. In Gauteng, a 33-year-old man is expected to appear in court today for allegedly stabbing 2 toddlers and their mother in Soweto. 2 boys aged 2 and 3 and their 20-year-old mother were attacked during a robbery in their home in Dobsonville Extension 3 on Tuesday night. 2 men were believed to be involved. Police arrested him on Wednesday night.
We had arrested a 33-year-old man in connection of the 2 kids who were stabbed during the house robbery at Dobsonville. He was taken in for questioning after we got the information about him, and then we did our investigation, and we found that indeed he is linked to the case of house robbery and stabbing the kids.
Meanwhile, in Australia this morning, violence against children is also dominating headlines. According to Australian police, 8 children aged between 18 months and 15 years were found stabbed to death at a house in the city of Cairns in northern Queensland. There are also reports that a woman was taken to hospital with stab wounds. The inquest into the fatal Lagos building collapse in Nigeria has heard that the extension to the building didn't have planning approval. 116 people, including 85 South Africans, died on September the 12th when a guest house belonging to televangelist TV Joshua collapsed. 74 bodies were returned last month for burial, while 11 more are yet to be identified and repatriated. Staying in Africa, Kenyan lawmakers have voted in favor of a tough anti-terror bill following a heated debate that sparked a brawl in parliament between opposition and pro-government MPs. The new legislation gives authorities sweeping powers to crack down on terror suspects in a country. Kenya has faced a string of attacks by Somalia-based Al-Shabaab militants. And then back in South Africa, around 35,000 pensioners face a bleak Christmas after an early payment by the Social Security Agency. The pensioners were apparently unaware that they had been paid early, and when they tried to withdraw their December payouts, the funds had already reverted to SASSA. I'll remember all those top stories and more are all available on our Newsroom Facebook page. And then, of course, our journalists are all out and about all over the country. You can keep up to date with the latest news on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Thanks, Katrine. More than 3,000 law enforcement officers have been deployed on the roads throughout the country during the festive season. Major roadblocks are part of the strategies implemented by government to reduce road crashes and fatalities during the festive season and beyond. The department has urged traffic law enforcement agencies to be on high alert. Now, the departmental spokesperson, Kwanele Ngalane, was going to join us this morning, but he couldn't. He says police have, urged police officers to adopt a harsh approach to those of us violating traffic regulations during this time. A 32-year-old motorist has been arrested for driving at more than 180 kilometers per hour in a 120 zone at Ellingham on the KwaZulu-Natal south coast. Now, this morning I'm joined by Mr. Marius Late, who is the spokesperson of the Automobile Association. Mr. Late, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Evan, and to your viewers.
It's always a difficult time of the year. Yeah. From the AA's perspective, how would you like to see motorists prepare themselves for the congestion we have on the road, but also for the long travels that we see at this time of year?
Yeah, if we can start, I think before you start your journey, one of the big things is to plan that journey and make sure you know exactly where you're going, what is happening on the route. There's different applications that you can use, so plan that journey. Then if you travel for instance, from Johannesburg to Cape Town, which is a long journey, our advice is to rest beforehand. Every 200 kilometers or 2 hours, get out of your car, rest, and be wide awake. We know that the major reasons for accidents are human factors, it's the road conditions, and it's the vehicle fitness that's counting.
On screen we now see, of course, the police doing their work. Traffic officials are stationed around the country. It happens every year. We've got these fantastic campaigns that are rolled out at this time and other peak times, but still it doesn't seem as if road users respond to this, and we still see carnage on the road. Why is that?
You're absolutely correct. If we look on average at the figures, we've got a figure of 14,600 fatalities. That's the latest statistics coming from the government and its agencies. The reason why is it's a behavioral issue on the roads, and I think communication should be linked to law enforcement also. We know there's scarce resources, and that means you need statistics in the end of the day. Just to add to that is, when we say 14,600, we're talking about fatalities, it's people that's dying on the roads. But if you work that figure back to non-fatalities, people that's only injured, it's a very high figure of about over 200,000 people during a year, which is very, very high.
It's very high, amongst the highest in the world.
It's amongst the highest.
Amongst the highest in the world. How do we deal with this, though? How do we go forward into next year and beyond, and understand the problem that we have?
Yeah, I think let's start on a high level. Maybe we should look at the 1996 National Road Safety Strategy. Maybe that strategy should be reviewed, and we should link it to the resources that's available to us. There is agencies that's responsible for that, so law enforcement is very important. So you're absolutely right. In the beginning of the show, you said it's not only about talk, it's about also law enforcement. Yeah. So whatever you communicate, there must be law enforcement behind it.
Harsher penalties, is that maybe something that could be a deterrent?
That can be. We are awaiting what they call the R2 Act, the demerit system regulations. I think that will help, because if you look at accidents, 50% of people that's been in an accident, their alcohol levels are higher than the legal alcohol level that's allowed in the end of the day.
Even pedestrians that die on the road are often under the influence of alcohol.
Even pedestrians, and you mentioned pedestrians, they are actually the highest category of people or road user that's been killed on our roads. So it's not only the driver of motors, passengers, cyclists, but also pedestrians. And you're absolutely right. We need to educate them, make them more visible, and the communication program should include to make them aware of the rules of the road.
Now, Mr. Late, before I let you go, it's not all doom and gloom at the moment. Yeah. There's some good news for motorists. We see the oil price globally coming down and slumping, and we always complain that, the petrol price always goes up, the oil price comes down, but the cost of living never does. The good news from your side is that you're forecasting that the next couple of months will be quite good for motorists. What's the numbers say?
What the numbers is saying is, we know that the oil price internationally is coming down, and we always link that to the rand-dollar exchange rate. What the numbers is saying is that the downward trend of the oil price is more than the rand-dollar exchange rate. That means that our predictions is saying that petrol, for instance, will come down between 105 cents and and R1.07, diesel in the order of 85 cents, and paraffin in the order of 90 cents, plus minus. That means we hope by the end of December we can see at the pump where the people is paying that the petrol price will be under 12 rand, and that is money in the pocket of the road user and the motorist.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lote, for joining us. I hope that all the road users will spend that money wisely. It's always nice to hear that the price of fuel is coming down. I'd like to see the cost of living come down a little bit, but that's just me. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That's the spokesperson of the Automobile Association here in South Africa, Mr. Marius Late, talking to us about traffic congestion, travelling, and, of course, the petrol prices coming down. So that's a little bit of good news as we go into the festive cheer. Now, as part of its ongoing emergency response to Ebola in West Africa, Doctors Without Borders has carried out the largest ever distribution of anti-malarials in Sierra Leone, alongside the Ministry of Health in that country. Teams distributed 1.5 million anti-malarial treatments to residents of Freetown and 5 districts in the surrounding western area, with the aim of protecting people from malaria during the disease's peak season. Sierra Leone has the 5th highest prevalence of malaria globally, and the disease is the biggest killer of children under 5 in the country. Malaria symptoms include high fever, dizziness, headaches, muscle aches and fatigue, many of which are similar to the symptoms of early-stage Ebola. Now, joining us on the line is Dr. Tom Allman, who is Médecins Sans Frontières South Africa's medical director. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
1.5 million treatments is quite a number. Just tell us how these treatments are being rolled out and who are they reaching? Are they reaching those that need it most?
Yeah, we're specifically targeting the areas where there is a high population at major risk of both malaria and Ebola. So that's in the capital city, Freetown, and a number of districts around Sierra Leone. But we're also doing this in Liberia. And it's a massive logistical effort. We've been training thousands of volunteers, I think over 6,000 people, to help distribute the drugs, going door to door through the slum areas of the town and the surrounding villages. And literally going to each household, ticking off with a list of the people together with the Ministry of Health, and explaining how to take the treatments and offering them. And people are really desperate and keen to receive these drugs. So it's a massive effort.
There are still those who are not aware of the dangers of malaria. Could you just provide us with sort of the backstory of malaria on the content and the threat that it has for the poorest of the poor?
Yeah, I mean, malaria is a major killer. Over 500,000 people die every year, 90% of them in Africa, and most of those are children. Nearly 500,000 children die every year under the age of 5 from malaria. Sierra Leone, Liberia, West Africa are right at the epicenter of malaria endemicity in Africa. And even at the best of times, thousands of children die in this country with hugely underinvested health system, very few doctors and nurses. But now with Ebola and the collapse of the health system, you can imagine that access to diagnosis and treatment for malaria is extremely difficult. And because the symptoms are so similar, everybody with a fever is now fearful that they have Ebola. So they're going to Ebola treatment centers, which are already overloaded. And nurses and people in the health centers are also very frightened when they see somebody with malaria. So it's desperately important in this context that we do everything we can to prevent malaria or treat it early so that people don't have to live with this fear that they have malaria, and, of course, prevent them from getting sick and dying of malaria itself.
How do you distinguish between these diseases then, Doctor? Because the symptoms initially can be quite similar.
Yep, they can be very similar. They can be identical, and it's impossible without tests to distinguish them. For malaria, we have a fairly good test, a fairly good blood test that can rapidly tell you whether or not somebody has malaria. But because we have a no-touch policy in the context of the Ebola crisis and the risk of infection from blood, we really want to be able to treat people without having to make a laboratory diagnosis. Ebola is more difficult to diagnose, and the blood tests are complicated. They take at least a day for the result, and often much, much longer if you have to send the blood test away. And even if they're negative, you have to wait because you can't be certain. A negative test doesn't exclude Ebola. So the critical thing really here is to try and prevent fevers and prevent malaria as widely as possible so people don't have to go through that fear that they may have Ebola.
And what would your advice then be to people over this period, the high-risk period? How do we go out and protect ourselves?
Well, I mean, we know very well how to prevent malaria. The problem is that poor people in rural areas don't have access either to knowledge or to the tools. The tools essentially involve spraying insecticides and bed nets, and every child in these countries should be sleeping under an insecticide-treated bed net. So we're doing, alongside the treatment distributions, massive distributions of bed nets. But again, people often don't have access to these. And then if you do contract malaria, rapid diagnosis and treatment. And we now have effective treatments, Artemisia-based treatments they're called, and that's what we're distributing. So we know that it's easy to diagnose and treat malaria, and the tragedy is that despite that, because largely of underfunding and lack of support to malaria and to health systems, 500,000 people still die every year.
Well, Dr. Elman, thank you for joining us on the line there from Cape Town at very last minute. Joining us this morning, that's Dr. Tom Elman, who is with Médecins Sans Frontières here in South Africa. Let's have a look at your tweets. At SABC Newsroom, of course, is where we expect you to send us your tweets. And today we're dealing, well, with parliamentary issues in Kenya. Some thought it's only South Africa. Irony is having armed police outside Parliament to stop civilians from rioting when the riots come from within. Yes, they've been fighting inside the Kenyan Parliament. In the manner, so the security bill was acrimoniously passed. Even Robert Mugabe will not sign it into law in fear of consequences. Occupy Parliament, says the Consumers Federation. Kavoy Maina says, as much as democracy is said to be a game of numbers, it should be one of tolerance as well. Sober debate was required on the security bill. Leek Edward Troll says, what's wrong with provisions requiring landlords to keep records of their tenants and to hand them over to police on demand? Hashtag security bill. There we have a picture of what's been going on outside the Parliament. Insecurity says, a culture of violence seems to be a Kenyan culture. Security bill, House of Shame. Hashtag Occupy Parliament. Some of you out there have been telling me, please read out the hashtags out loud because we want to see it. Well, you should be seeing it on screen, I think. But anyhow, if you've missed that story from Kenya, which has been trending on social media the last 24 hours, here you see it. Chaos erupted in the public gallery and among the legislators, who threw water at the deputy speaker and books at the speaker as well. President Uhuru Kenyatta had urged Parliament to pass the measure, saying it will strengthen security following a series of terrorist attacks blamed on the Somali Islamic group Al-Shabaab. But it was opposed by the media, human rights groups and the main opposition coalition, who say it will restrict freedoms. Not just in South Africa do we have issues in Parliament at the moment. It seems to be a growing global trend. But let's take a look at the front pages from around the world. What's happening elsewhere in the world today? The China South Morning Post is reporting that President Vladimir Putin yesterday showed no sign of changing tack on war-torn Ukraine and compared Russia to a bear fighting for survival at his annual news conference in Moscow. Then, in the United States, the Financial Times is also reporting that Putin blames the West for Russia's economic woes. Down under in Australia, the Daily Telegraph continues to look at the aftermath of the Sydney siege. There you'll see messages left for those Lint Cafe victims on the still growing shrine in the city of Sydney. Before we go to a break, let's just have a look at what's happening across the country today. In Durban, the sentencing of convicted axe murderer, rapist and former Blue Bulls rugby player Pindele Joseph Njongwana is expected to be handed down in the High Court. Then Nkandla, President Jacob Zuma is expected to attend the Jacob Zuma Chess Open tournament that starts today. And then the first test, of course, between South Africa and the West Indies continues in Centurion this after rain marred the second day yesterday. You're watching Newsroom. We'll be back with you shortly.
waterproof smartphone takes superior photos even in low light. Has PlayStation 4 remote play and up to 2 days battery life. Don't settle for good. Demand great. The new Sony Xperia Z3 series. Our new waterproof smartphone takes superior photos even in low light. Has PlayStation 4 remote play and up to 2 days battery life. Don't settle for good. Demand great. The new Sony Xperia Z3 series.
Get the new Sony Xperia Z3 on a My MTN Choice 100 contract for only $4.99 and get a free 12-month music streaming subscription.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom. Climate change is no longer just a scientific curiosity or just an ordinary environmental concern. It is now a major overriding environmental issue of our time and the single greatest challenge facing environmental regulators. Our environmental specialists, as well as weatherman at times, Paul Tsietsemonari, is here to talk to us about climate change and sort of looking back a little bit at 2014 if we have time. Now, Paul, will this be a landmark here? The UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon arranged climate summit to highlight the seriousness of this issue. Do you think that this message was clearly understood and received well? Yeah. And this is the moment?
Yeah, I certainly think so. 2014 has been one of those busy years when it comes to climate change talk. You know, basically everything about climate change has been spread out there. There was a big march in September in New York, just around Central Park, and it was quite massive. 300,000 people showed up there. They call it the People's March on Climate Change, and I really think the message was being pushed more than anything else this year, and it was quite a big drive. They got big people to come out, and they got big businesses and big countries to actually make pledges and talk about climate change.
We see that. We see that all the time, that when we come to COP17 or COP20 as it is now, will we see the big economies follow through on the promises that they make at the UN?
Yeah, I think to keep pace, a lot of them are actually trying to step up now, especially the big economies, and they are the largest contributors or the largest, culprits to climate change. Yeah. And, with some of them not wanting to sign the Kyoto Protocol, which is, always been a big issue, saying, we've got all this oil, we really need to use it, but then again, it's polluting and it's causing degradation, environmental degradation. And because everybody's talking about it, we've got the Al Gores, the Leonardo DiCaprio's, Morgan Freeman. Those are really big people who are, they've got a lot of following. And if your country is not stepping up, to show what what everybody else is doing for climate change, it kind of looks bad on your part. And I think, Barack Obama also said it. He had a whole press conference on that and what the pledges that he's going to make. So I think they are really going to step up and come forward with this one.
You mentioned the actors, the Hollywood celebrities, the Leonardo DiCaprios, who are taking up the baton against climate change. But how does this help? Is it not just maybe a hype to get the big names involved?
Yeah.
Do we need that?
If you think about how marketing has been going and how social media is basically quite influential at the moment, and if you get somebody with a big following, if you get someone with 2 million followers on Twitter or Instagram, all of those, and they get to talk about climate change and they get to do speeches, a lot of people actually pay attention. If you think about if you're trying to sell a suit, a very beautiful suit, and then you got Evan Janssen wearing the suit, a lot of people flock down to go get that suit. So that's basically what they're doing as well with the Leonardo DiCaprio, with the Morgan Freemans of the world. That they're getting these people's voices, they're getting these people's appearances. Leonardo delivered one amazing speech. I was actually fortunate enough to be there to see the speech.
That was the speech that you attended,
Yeah. It was phenomenal. It was almost as if this person is talking for all of these presidents, and everybody sat there and they listened. And I can tell you, if a Matt Damon tells you, this is what's happening to the fisheries, I know he's very involved with water and oceans, and a lot of people actually pay attention. And there's also films about all of these things coming out.
Tell us about those films here. You mentioned 5 of the films that are dealing with this issue, and this is obviously the way to get it into popular culture then.
Yeah, I actually thought about that would be quite interesting to talk about. We all watch movies at any given point. And with the festive coming up, a lot of shows will be going on a break and showing movies. So I decided, you know what, let's have a look at a couple of movies that have been made. And since as far as 1995, you know, there's a movie called Waterworld that was made in 1995. Kevin Costner. It was a blockbuster, big film. And it was basically talking about how the polar ice caps were melting and now sea level rose and people were basically living in the ocean.
The water,
and people were adapting. So it's sort of a post-apocalyptic kind of future where people are developing fins and they're developing these funny gills to survive.
It turned into a fish in the end there, Paul. I hope that's not my lot, that in the end I'll turn into a fish and be living on a dinghy.
Yeah, and there's also sort of a new theme coming up now. It's called cli-fi. You know, you remember the sci-fi type of talk?
Yes,
now there's cli-fi.
Oh, it's a new genre.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
There's two really good movies that are out now. There's Interstellar, that it's actually in cinemas now, and then there's one called Snowpiercer that came out last year, or beginning of this year. It's basically about climate change experiments that have gone horribly wrong, and you know, people have to live in different platforms. In Snowpiercer, people are actually living on a train, and it's just going right across the planet. And in Interstellar, people have to leave the planet and go look for different planets that we can, you know, use for agriculture as climate change destroyed agriculture on Earth.
You talk about the effects of climate change. We start to see it really in our own lives. We've had tornadoes here in South Africa, and Joe, and so wait till we've had a tornado this year. So there is a real effect. Just tell us about your high or low lights within the weather scenarios we've seen in 2014.
Yeah, we've had some really amazing stuff. I mean, the severe thunderstorms that we're still experiencing now. Thunderstorms are really related to climate change, and they've been quite hectic. We've seen the hectic storms in Buffalo in the United States. I just needed to bring that one because that was quite big. Here in South Africa, as you mentioned, tornadoes. Somebody mentioned the earthquakes that took place just beginning of, I think, September or
We'll blame
August.
the mining for that one.
Yes, so I wanted to say, you know, that was not that's seismic activity. That's basically have to do with seismology here in the plate tectonics and also the mining industry that we have. But yeah, sandstorms we've had. We've had some hectic clouds in the Eastern Cape province over East London and so on. Yeah, so it's been quite interesting this year, and all of these events really are linked to how we are changing or how we are affecting the climate of the planet.
Well, Paul, thank you for being here with us throughout the year. Of course, today's our final broadcast, but you'll be staying on to keep the nation informed, of course.
No, of course, yeah. The weatherman's work is never ending, eh?
Yes, the weatherman is the only man that can get it wrong also and keep his job, unlike some of us. But thank you, Paul, for always coming through and giving us not just the weather these days, but also updates on climate, looking at the environment, and a host of other stuff we'll be doing next year. So fantastic working with you this year, and look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you too.
That was Paul Tsietse Monare bringing us the real issue of climate change throughout the whole year. But let's have a look at your tweets. Our year that we're talking about number 1 jersey. Udo Carlson, we are in denial that Kune was out for a long time. That's why he was not chosen. I think that Shakes just sees Kune for what he kind of is. Dumasani says, Kune must seriously consider overseas offers. Left out of Bafana, losing armband, and Baxter won't just drop Kuzwayo. Well, I can tell you, overseas clubs want you to play for your national team. It's more than 75% of matches. I find it hard to believe that Kune is left out. Hashtag Bafana Bafana, says Ignatius. Well, I mean not so. Lafiti Puti says, the Kaizer Chiefs people are hurting since Itumeleng Kune is not in the squad. Shakes Mashaba knows what is best for Bafana Bafana. Lefifi, I agree with you. I won't give my personal opinion on Itumeleng Kune because ultimately he's a Chiefs player, and the Chiefs fans here in the studio with me, they're very sensitive about this thing. So we'll move on. It is the end of the year, and what a year it's been, especially on a local as well as international news front. We had high-profile court cases, 2014 elections, social media campaigns, slacktivism, like Bring Back Our Girls, the Ice Bucket Challenge. Throughout the year, we were joined by Roy Africa's Managing Director, Tonya Kure, who kept us up to speed with all the latest trending topics on social media, various other platforms. She's with us again today to wrap the year that was. Good morning to you, Tonya. Always nice to have you with us.
Good morning, Eben. It's always nice to be here.
Roy Africa saw big newsmakers. Let's start with the local newsmakers in your view.
We've been studying, obviously, over the past year, all various different things. And South Africa has has definitely come of age when it comes to social media particularly, and then the news media also has moved a lot into online. So we had a look at the big stories. Some of the big stories we've been monitoring, we put them together. This statistic taken across print, radio, television, online news and social media here locally. And you'll see that Parliament has become a big thing. Politics is a big thing, isn't it, in our country, and has brought out a massive conversation. The ANC and Jacob Zuma, President Jacob Zuma, coming in at 59% over the past year against big stories that some of them which relate to him, like Nkandla and also Julius Malema and the EFF. Remarkable. Yeah,
a real talking point, isn't it?
You know, I've seen so often, Eben, that the chart just turns red. You know, whether you love or hate Juju, he can make social media noise and media noise in a very big way.
The editors love him. They don't like to admit it. The editors love him. They give the man column space. They always have. Some people say he's a creation of the media in a way here in South Africa. But tell us about the local stories that made international headlines.
Well, South Africa definitely came into the spotlight, specifically our judiciary. We saw Oscar Pistorius, the Oscar Pistorius trial and the Shireen Devani trial making massive headline news internationally. Oscar Pistorius, the biggest story in the world, by far. I mean, the only thing that comes close is Ebola. So, I mean, it's astounding to me when you measure the two against each other and the dynamic of the two situations in the media, that Oscar still trumps it. So, Oscar Pistorius coming in as the biggest story we've monitored this year. I think the biggest story anybody would ever monitor this year. And from an Ebola perspective, that came in at number 2. There's been other big stories. Shireen Devani.
Yes.
Probably didn't get as much airtime as it should have in the beginning, and got airtime for all the wrong reasons in the end, where he had an acquittal, and then the world reacted to that. The other thing I find strange, Eben, and this always fascinates me, if there's a good news story, we forget about it. If there's a bad news sells, right? But if there's bad news, it sort of escalates. So we've seen the world outcry about the verdict of Judge Masipa on Oscar Pistorius' trial. An 80% negative bias when the verdict came out, right?
Unbelievable.
So then the NPA win the appeal. They are granted the appeal on the conviction. Story is dead.
That's amazing. It shows us the humanitarian factor within humanity takes a backseat to celebrity and scandal and the likes of the sort of outcomes we've seen. People want to... we can be very harsh judges in our living rooms, and often we want people to pay. At times, we even judge people before the courts, which is very much the case we've seen this year.
Well, we saw definitely a trial by media for the Oscar Pistorius trial, and also a trial by media for the Shireen Devani trial. I mean, everybody said he was guilty from the very beginning. Nobody even knew the details of the case. So, yes, we're very quick to judge. We're also very quick to put a hashtag and believe we've done something good to the world, you know, like you're my favourite, Bring Back Our Girls and the Ice Bucket Challenge. I mean, so it does fascinate me how us from our... People can be so vocal on social media particularly, Evan. And I'm very nervous about what I put out for the rest of the world to see. And everybody should be, but they really don't care. I think what you've seen here is the international stories.
Yes, these are the international, or the biggest stories of the year internationally. You said Oscar is the biggest, then Ebola.
Amazing, isn't it? And then we come back to ISIS. And so, I mean, if you look at the statistics, Oscar trial and Ebola is so much bigger than ISIS. I mean, the James Foley beheading was massive. It was a very big story. And for the first time, we started seeing social media really dictating news. I mean, Gaza was another big story, where, again, social media took into the forefront and became the newsmaker rather than news dictating to social media. The World Cup coming in at 10% across the year. The Ferguson issue coming in at just under 14%. These statistics taken in over 100 countries. So it just shows you how much South Africa was on the world platform.
What is your highlight, personal highlight of 2014?
I absolutely love the convergence of news and social media in one place. I love that social media overtook news often. I love this environment, that statistics on media intelligence suddenly became the forefront of what we were talking about. It was a treasure for me, and I want to thank you for that.
Fantastic. Well, you've been fantastic Tonya, now that you're a media darling after you've been working with us, we are so happy. Hopefully you'll return the favour next year and come and visit us in a sort of regular scenario when we continue with the Newsroom show. But thank you also for coming through for us and giving us such wonderful detail into stories that's in the news almost every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan, and I'd be delighted.
Fantastic. That's the Managing Director of Roy Africa, Tonya Kure, keeping us once again up to date with what is happening, well, in more than just social media. It's really how we report on ourselves on this planet right now. Thank you very much for joining us today, Tonya.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
In all cities in Africa, there exists a unique and vibrant street culture which dictates the heartbeat of many cities throughout the African continent.
The city of Johannesburg is filled with vibrant scenes of hawking and selling.
This was from overseas. I think it's a donation from overseas now they're delivering to us.
Further up north, the same experience can be found as eager buyers barter with their hawkers.
The languages may be different, but the similarities are the one common thread that bind us all together as citizens of Africa.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays, 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Let us go to this dollars issue, dollars eventualis, dollars director. What do they actually mean to the ordinary man in the street?
A practical and easy example of dolus eventualis is where two robbers walk into a bank with the intention to rob the bank. They reconcile themselves that should the teller press the panic button, they are going to pull a trigger and kill. So the intention is not to kill, but the intention is basically to rob the bank.
That's Rights and Recourse, Sundays 2 p.m. on SABC News.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Well, hello and welcome back to Newsroom. Let's just recap the news making headlines this morning. 7 suspects are expected to appear in the Blue Downs Magistrates Court outside Cape Town today in connection with the killing of 6 men at Kraaifontein. The bodies of the men, who were aged between 25 and 40, were found on a dump site at Joostenberg Vlakte last week. They all appeared to have been stabbed and stoned to death. Police established a special task team shortly after the gruesome discovery. Meanwhile, in Australia this morning, violence against children is also dominating headlines. According to Australian police, 8 children aged between 18 months and 15 years were found stabbed to death at a house in the city of Cairns in northern Queensland. There are also reports that a woman was taken to hospital with stab wounds. And Kenyan lawmakers have voted in favour of a tough anti-terror bill following a heated debate that sparked a brawl in Parliament between opposition and pro-government MPs. The new legislation gives authorities sweeping powers to crack down on terror suspects in the country. Kenya has faced a string of attacks by Somalia-based Al-Shabaab militants. And remember, all those top stories and more are all available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Now, Miss Heritage is an international beauty pageant currently featuring in over 30 countries around the globe and will this weekend be crowning Miss Heritage 2014 right here in South Africa. Now, the pageant was founded on the basis of giving women from all around the world the opportunity to represent the most important feature of any country, its national heritage. Now, joining us today is Mr. Tare Mumzara, chairman of the Miss Heritage World, and the reigning queen from the Bahamas, Shakira King. Welcome to Newsroom, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The moment you walked in here, all the men were just, wow. You look stunning. Tare, I just want to start with you. Can you just give us the background as to where Miss Heritage started back in the day and the mission and vision behind it?
Miss Heritage started off in Victoria Falls. I was on holiday with my partner, Ronald. And we used to do a national page, and then we said, look, let's try to do something different, something that's more constructive, something that makes more sense and more substance. That's when we came up with the Miss Heritage concept. But basically, our vision is to promote world heritage It runs consistent with the UNESCO convention and also most countries' legislations in terms of heritage laws and all that.
Now, Shakira, you've been the reigning queen for now a year. What has it been like?
Oh, it's been wonderful. I can't even describe to you. It's been a memorable experience for me back in my home country. I had the opportunity to speak to so many young people. I have a heart for the youth. So I spoke to them because, you know, they are our future, and it's so important not to get distracted by all of the technology, but to use it to your advantage and just really express your heritage through everything that you do, particularly being abroad. You know, it's important just to represent where you're from and who you are, and that's what heritage is all about.
Now, the world's eyes were surely on South Africa this week now, with Rolene Strauss being our Miss World, announced our Miss World. What makes Miss Heritage different from all of the other pageants that we see around the world?
Okay, fine. Basically, we promote the most important feature of humanity. That's the national treasure of this country. That's heritage, and that is something most international beauty pageants don't focus on. And also our criteria and our activities. For example, last night we had something called Heritage Cuisine Queen, where all the countries cooked meals from their countries, and the winner was Australia, India, and Netherlands. And also we have something called Heritage Crafts Queen, where they make crafts from their country. We also have something called Ludo Diversity, where they play traditional games. They played in Tonga, the South African traditional game. They also played the Tsoro yesterday. So that's how different we are. And also in terms of our stage setup, our costumes, everything is heritage orientated, and each country is supposed to be endorsed by their government, which is something that most beauty pageants do not focus on.
Which countries are endorsing the Miss Heritage?
Okay, fine. Basically, the government of Ghana, the President's Office for Ghana, Education Services, Ministry of Tourism. We also have Rwanda, Ministry of Tourism. We also have Lesotho, Ministry of Tourism and Culture. We also have South Africa, Culture and Tourism. We also have Philippines, Philippines government, also Russian government, Italian government. So it's a lot of governments that have came up together to say this cause is very constructive. Let's support this, because this basically protects, preserves and conserves our heritage.
Shakira, what is your advice for the next Miss Heritage for the year of 2014? Of 2015.
I would tell her to truly embrace the title and to do everything in her power just to ensure that she does a wonderful job as the reigning queen, and really just encourage not just the young but also the old to really just grab a hold of where they're from, because like I said, heritage is what captures the essence of who we are, and so it's important just for everyone to just be proud of where they're from and to showcase that to the world.
Just to end off, Miss Heritage 2014 will be crowned tomorrow night. Can you give us the details and how people can get involved and follow the event if they want to?
Okay, fine. Basically, the event is at Silver Star Hotel and Casino. That's in Krugersdorp. They can follow us on Facebook. It's Miss Heritage. Twitter, Miss Heritage. For RSVP, it's invites@missheritage.org. So straight by invitation.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us this morning and telling us all about Miss Heritage 2014, who will be crowned tomorrow night, by the way. And you can follow it on Newsroom's Facebook page as well. We'll be uploading all of the details there. Eben is standing by with a sports wrap for this week.
For the year, really, Katrine, thank you very much. It's the third day of the first test match between South Africa and the West Indies. Of course, it's in Turin. South Africa's a muster total of well over 550 in Australia. It's also the third day of the second test there between Australia and India, and it looks like the Aussies are on top. But here in South Africa, the provisional squad for the AFCON in January has been announced. Lebogang Dube joins us in studio to talk about, well, the end of the year's sports, but also about the squad, and we look forward to, there's a World Cup in February, there's also the AFCON the month before that. Hi, Lebo, nice to join us.
Thanks, Evan. It's my pleasure to be here.
I know I'm supposed to start with the cricket, but I want to start with the soccer, because the big talking point on social media the last couple of days has been Itumeleng Khune. Shakes Mashaba has decided not to select him for this squad. What do you make of it, and what do you make of the outcry that we've seen?
Look, Evan, if you look at Itumeleng Khune got injured during the first campaign when they went to go and play against Sudan in Khartoum. He was not part of the team. He was not part of the team that played the qualifiers. Kaizer Chiefs has not been playing, just came back from that injury. And I think Shakes maybe thought that, let me just go with the players that, that have been there, that I've worked with. And you look at the goalkeepers. I mean, the 4 goalkeepers that he's decided to put in his professional squad. I think that, they can be able to do the job when they go to Equatorial Guinea.
There we have the squad. What do you make of the squad? And also, is it a trust issue between Shakes and Itumeleng Khune? In my opinion, I agree with Shakes. I think that there are question marks over, especially leadership from Itumeleng Khune. Leadership is one, and then, communication and controlling the box is another one. But what do you make? Is there a breakdown of trust?
Well, I wouldn't say that there's a breakdown of trust, but I just think that Itu needs to play more games. And I think he will eventually be selected. I mean, the AFCON is not the end of the road. They still need to play more qualifiers. After the AFCON, there'll be more games as well. So I think he will come into the team based on his performance, obviously, at Kaizer Chiefs. But I think with Darren Keat having done the job in the last 2 matches after the death of Senzo, I think then he thought, I've got enough backup and I've got enough quality to go to AFCON.
And I don't want to bring anyone in that's going to disrupt the peace and harmony within my squad. Is that right?
Do you think that would disrupt the peace and harmony?
I think so. But that's only my opinion. I'm not a selector. What do I know about football anyhow? But let's move on and talk about cricket rather, Lebo. South Africa, we're playing against the West Indies here at Centurion. Looks like we're well on top there, but the weather looks like it might spoil the party over the next couple of days, yeah?
The weather, it was a disappointment yesterday, looking that, they were on the move, Hashim Amla there with Stean Van Zyl on his debut, hitting a century there, becoming the 5th South African to have to hit a century on his debut. You look at Hashim actually commenting, saying that, he didn't want to declare, but because of the rain, they had to declare. And he said that he was looking to at least play 36 or 38 overs. And that would have given a good score run for the Proteas. But I think as well, the West Indians have not come to the party. I think their bowling attack has not been that strong. I think their fielding has also been questionable. So I think South Africa, they had a lucky one this time against the West Indies. I don't know if I should say it's going to be a good prep for the South Africans ahead of the World Cup. Well, it is preparation, but going into the World Cup, we know that South Africa, the Proteas, they disappoint, they choke.
Yeah.
But let's hope that with this game, it will boost their morale and their confidence.
It's nice to see South Africans getting runs before a big tournament, double 100 for Hashim, 150 for AB, but it's also a concern that we depend a lot on these two in all formats, really.
We depend a lot on these two, and I was actually, speaking to one of my colleagues, saying that should anything happen to the two, I think that would be the breakdown or the crumble of the Proteas. But it's good as well to see that the likes of Stean is, coming in as well. I think maybe you can trust him. To
you think they'll move him up the order and open the batting with him in place of Alvaro Pedersen going forward, maybe?
For now, I don't think so. I think he'll still remain in the middle, and which I think is also good, so that if your top get out, and then you've got someone that you can rely on to give you those runs.
Australia, it's been an emotional month for them, having lost 4 U's and all the stuff that's gone on, and they've lost their captain. But they're still playing well against India. Is it a question of Australia galvanizing emotionally and mentally, or is it a question of this Indian team has always been a bad touring side and they're going to get another 4-5-0 thumping down in Australia?
India has not been good. Recently they've not performed as expected. Australia as well, rightfully so, saying that, I think emotionally as well, playing for Phil Hughes, but I think they've really come to the party. I mean, you look at how they've controlled the game, taking a 97-run lead in the first innings, which is not a bad score, and I think India will need to pull up the socks. Whether they'll be able to come all right against Australia, I doubt. But I think Australia as well is just a good team overall.
That's right. Very good, balanced, rounded team, very much like the team that did Newsroom this year. Thank you very much, Lebo. Thanks for coming through to us. It's been a fantastic year, but now it's holiday time for me. Unfortunately, I know you'll be hanging around for a week or so.
I'll still be here for quite
Thank you very much, Lebo. That's where we wrap. Thank you, Katrine, for a wonderful year. It's been great working with Katrine, and thank you to all of you for supporting the show. supporting everything we do in a format that we've brought that's been completely different to what we've all been, or you've all been used to. We'll do more of the same next year, Katrine.
Yes, so happy holidays to everybody, and thank you for all of the support. You can catch all of our interviews we did throughout the entire year on YouTube. It's also uploaded to our Facebook page.
Yeah, of course, if you wanted to communicate with us at SABC Newsroom, but only from the 5th of January, because that's when we'll be back live. We'll be playing out highlights for the next couple of weeks of all the best interviews and shows we've had. Of course, the show's broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday between 9 and 10 a.m.
The show repeats at 2 in the afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following day. We're also streaming live on YouTube at the time, with the show available on demand on our YouTube channel.
This is SABC News.
You've been watching Newsroom.
We love it in the morning.
Love it in the morning.
Bye. See you next year.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
The judge slammed corruption in both the private and public sector. Referring to irregular and wasteful government expenditure, he said it could no longer go on.
The high-profile corruption scandal has dominated Spain's headlines in recent weeks. The scandal touching a nerve as Spain emerges from its downturn after a slew of corruption cases involving politicians and the king's sister.
Tourism is a vital part of the economy. It contributes about 5% to the country's GDP and is a significant contributor to various industries such as food production, retail and transport.
For all your business news, stay tuned to your favorite channel, SABC News, at 1 Monday to Friday.
There's a lot of corruption there. What are you doing with that?
The word corruption is actually misplaced.
Any elements of corruption must be rooted out and punished accordingly.
SASCO is denying that there's any evidence of such.
We've heard the allegations about students not assisting the situation.
Why do you have to be pressurized to do your job, Mr. Msulu?
We spend everything that we get given by government.
It's an excuse.
Who's failing you at government?
Who's failing us at government?
Who's not heeding your call?
The government is the government.
Is Dr. Blade Nzimande doing well?
With what he has done, we want him to do more. We want him to deliver more.
So he's failing.
The Minister of Higher Education, don't put words in my mouth.
Watch Question Time with me, Mpho Tsedu, Monday to Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on the SABC News channel.
Kunjani, Nda, Assalamu alaikum, Goeiemorgen, Namaste, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to